Hi, this is Laetitia and Shannon from Hachette, and you're listening to L'Intention, the podcast where authors reveal what lies at the heart of their latest book and what guided its creation. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Ken Follett, one of the world's most widely read and translated authors.
This year is releasing the fifth installment of the Kingsbridge saga, which began in 1989 with the release of the iconic novel The Pillars of the Earth. This highly anticipated new volume, titled The Armour of Light and published by Le Livre de Poche, was first released by Robert Laffont and as an audiobook by Audiolib, narrated by Steve Dreesen. In this monumental historical novel, set in late 18th century England, Ken Follett paints a sweeping portrait of the Industrial Revolution and the war against Napoleonic France. The book brings to life the struggle of men and women fighting for freedom, urging readers to cast off works of darkness and take up the armour of light.
The armour of light. In the 18th century, working people sought education. They were in conflict with the bosses, and they felt at a disadvantage because the bosses could read and write and they understood politics, and working people felt they didn't know enough. So they set up societies and clubs in order to learn to read and write and to learn about politics and philosophy and war. And they did this because they felt it would protect them from exploitation by the bosses. And so it's armour. Knowledge is armour to protect them against the bosses. And the light is the education. Two characters, two women, two strong women. One of them is poor, and she is thrown out of her village. She goes to the nearest town. She immediately gets a job. And it's a job working a machine called a spinning jenny, which was a spinning machine. But she is involved, and she becomes kind of a leader in these disputes between the workers and the bosses. And she's kind of moderate. Her husband believes that if we smash the machines, then we'll all get jobs doing spinning. And she knows that this isn't right, that it doesn't work that way. And so she's a more strategic fighter, but she's fighting for the rights of the workers. Elsie is not working class. She is an upper class girl. And so she helps people top down, Lady Bountiful. But she really believes in education for poor children. And so she starts a school. And so she's part of, she is part of the armour of light. She's giving this power to children. And of course, there are people who say it's a very bad idea to educate the working class. As soon as they become educated, they will become dissatisfied with their lives. Well, yeah, of course. And it's kind of an admission, isn't it? Oh, well, once they learn anything, they'll realize how badly they're being treated. Anyway, so, those two women in completely different ways are fighting for the rights of the working class.
The first intention, relaying the obstacles in the pursuit of freedom.
A lot of my books are about people struggling for freedom. And this is always a great story. And it's different kinds of freedom. In A Column of Fire, for example, is about religious freedom. And in Fall of Giants, I've written about women seeking the vote. And in each case, the hero is the underdog. The people with no power seek power. And that's always a good story because we sympathize with the underdog and we want the underdog to win. And in each of these stories, people win a new freedom. It fascinates me. If we look back 1,000 years, people had no freedom. Most people had no freedom at all. And the bosses, or the aristocracy, the nobility, had no reason to give them freedom. They liked things the way they were. It was great for them. And over the centuries, people have fought for freedom in different forms and have won it. And I'm always interested, how did they do that? Take the suffragettes. They wanted votes for women. The men did not want them to have votes. The men had all the power, but they fought a political battle and they won. And that's a great story. So that's really the underlying theme of the Kingsbridge books and many of my other books. Well, there's a conflict in The Armour of Light. There's always a conflict in a novel. That's what makes it a good story. What I like about the conflict in the Industrial Revolution is that really both sides are right. The boss says the price of cotton has fallen on the international market. Therefore, I cannot pay you this week the same as I paid you last week, because if I did that, I would lose money. So this week, your wages are half what they were last week. And he's right, of course. He can't do business if he loses money, he will soon go out of business. But the workers say, with this much money, we can't buy bread for our family. And of course, they're right too. Both sides are right. And that's a really interesting conflict. And we're interested in the way it's resolved. We sympathize most, of course, with the workers. But we understand the logic of what the bosses are saying. And that makes it a really interesting conflict. And that's what attracted me to the 18th century.
The second intention, to bring history to life through the eyes of the character.
Well, history in history books is a bit boring. Everybody knows this. But in a novel, we see the same events, but we see them from the point of view of an individual character. And we share the emotions of the people who are living through this history. So, for example, in Fall of Giants, I wrote about the First World War. And in a history book, it tells you this was the battle, it happened on this day. On the one side, there were 100,000 men. On the other side, there were 150,000 men. These had cannon, these had rifles. This is all very dull. In a novel, we start with a young man, a soldier, who is going into battle, and he's going to try to kill people, and people are going to try to kill him. And he must be, more or less, scared. He might be very scared or just a little scared, but he's thinking about this. He's thinking, will I kill somebody? Will somebody kill me? Maybe I will just be so scared that I will turn and run away, and then it'll be a disgrace. I'll be a coward. So now we have all these emotions with this young man, and we want to find out how it turns out. Now we're really interested in this battle because of this young man. And that's the difference between a novel and a history book. And I often get messages from readers who say, I wish I'd had your books when I studied history in school, because history was so boring in school, and in your books it's not boring. The Armour of Light begins in 1792. It's immediately after the beginning of the French Revolution, and the ruling class of all the other European countries is terrified. The rulers are terrified. The kings and the princes and the prime ministers of all the European countries are frightened. They think this revolution is going to come to their country. And what they did in Britain, the prime minister was William Pitt, and he took away what few rights the British people had. So he made it illegal to have a meeting to discuss the government. This reminds us of the Soviet Union. So often when working people were meeting to discuss how to make their own lives better, they were committing crimes. And this went on. There's a good book about William Pitt written by a man called William Hague, who for a while was the leader of the Conservative Party in my country. And I said to him, I found your book very helpful. It's a very good book. But you didn't really say that Prime Minister William Pitt took away from the British people the few civil rights that they actually had. And he was a bit taken aback by this question, you know, because I was very polite. I mean, and he said, but that was only temporary. Well, these rules lasted for 30 years, so it wasn't very temporary. Anyway, that was the reaction of the... So the working people, as well as having their conflict with the boss, also had a conflict with the government. That, of course, made it an even better story.
The third intention, to leave history from research to experience.
I always begin with books, history books about the period that I'm going to write about. And I read a lot, and by the end of the process, I have several shelves of history books. And that's great, but it isn't quite enough. So I do like to get some direct experience. And in the case of the Armour of Light, there is, in Manchester in England, there is an old mill, very big mill, a very big factory, which employed hundreds of people making cotton. And so I was able to see the environment in which my characters would have worked. And they also have these great machines, and the machines still work. So there's a machine for spinning cotton into thread. And you've seen the pictures of the old woman with the big wheel. And she's feeding the cotton in and turning the wheel slowly. And of course, she is doing one thread at a time. So I've seen a machine that spins more than 100 threads at the same time. And the machine is bigger than this room that we're in now. It's enormous and very fast and noisy. And they turn it on, and all these threads, more than 100 threads, they're all spinning like this. And when they've spun for a few seconds, a huge bar comes forward, bang, like this, and comes back, and then they spin a little bit more. And, you know, that was the environment in which my characters lived. The weaving machines are even noisier. So they would have a weaving room with maybe 48 machines, and they're very noisy machines. You know, while they turned one on for me, and it goes bang, clank, bang, clack, bang, clank. When they were all working, it must have been absolutely deafening. In fact, it was so loud that people developed sign language to speak to one another because they couldn't hear one another. And some of the people went deaf. If they worked for 30 years in one of these factories, that by the end of it, they would be deaf. So that's so much better than a book for me, because I can create the atmosphere of how these people spent their days. And the Industrial Revolution is a story about machines as well as a story about people. And anything like that, you know, if in a story somebody goes to another country, I like to go to the country myself and see. And you can do it out of books, but it's much better to experience these things yourself.
A hypothetical question: what if you could spend a day in the universe of your book?
If I could spend one day in the story of the Armour of Light, that day would be the day of the Battle of Waterloo, which was the 15th of June, 1815, one of the great battles in history. Napoleon, certainly the greatest general of his time, maybe the greatest general of all time. On the other side, the Duke of Wellington, a great general, but no comparison really with Napoleon. The two sides even, the French and the English. And during the course of the day, the French began to win, slowly, slowly, slowly. But there were some Germans coming to help the English. Prussians, really, not Germans, Prussians. But they were a long way away, 12 miles away. And Wellington is looking at his watch. Where are these damn Prussians? They had a terrible time, the Prussians, because they set off in the morning. They had to pass through a little town called Wavre. And there was a fire in the town, the middle of the town caught on fire. There was a fire in a bakery, and they had to go back. Okay, now this is 80,000 men, and horses and gun carriages. They all got to the middle of they crossed the bridge over the river. They come, and then somebody, go back. Oh, you go back. Terrible chaos. And so they were very late coming to the battlefield, but not too late. When the Prussians arrived, the battle turned around, and the French were outnumbered now. And all these Prussians, they were fresh, they were new to the battle. And from then on, it was, we claim it in Britain. We say it was a British victory. Waterloo, we have a railway station called Waterloo, statues of Wellington, but it was actually these Prussians who won it for us. That's the irony of history.
This podcast is L'Intention, brought to you by Hachette. It is here that writers of fiction, non-fiction, comic books, and children's literature come to share insights into the inspiration and intention behind their latest books.
If you enjoyed the episode, let us know by leaving a nice comment, sending a heart, or rating us with 5 stars. We will see you all again soon for the next episode.